Broadcast from London, I'm Ollie Barrett and these are the headlines.
This year I think our average price would have been below £7 a kilo if we'd carried on picking, and that is just, it hardly covers the harvesting and marketing, never mind all the growing costs and everything else that you need in business.
Russia says it's resuming participation in the Ukraine grain deal 5 days after it suspended its role, alleging drone attacks by Ukraine on its Black Sea fleet. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak will attend the COP27 summit after initially saying he was too busy with domestic issues to attend the conference in Egypt. Former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan compares his struggle to that of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the late founding father of Bangladesh. Chinese authorities imposed lockdowns on 600,000 people in the area surrounding the world's largest iPhone factory after some workers fled to avoid COVID restrictions. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has made a U-turn over his decision not to attend this month's UN Climate Summit. He's tweeted to say that he will go to COP27 next week after all. That decision comes after former Prime Minister Boris Johnson confirmed his intention to go to the climate meeting. Britain's COP26 President Alok Sharma, who lost his cabinet minister rank after Sunak took office, had said that Rishi Sunak's absence at the summit could undermine the nation's position as a world leader on green issues. Alok Sharma now says he is delighted that Sunak will be there. King Charles had been advised by Downing Street not to attend the event, but the King will be hosting a pre-conference reception at Buckingham Palace ahead of COP27, bringing together 200.
And you heard me earlier on say that who has a plan that you will have heard earlier on to defuse the to what one of the young delegates said today.
North Korea and South Korea both fired missiles into waters off each other's coasts as tensions in the region rise further. The North launched at least 23 missiles, which the South describes as a territorial invasion. One of them landed less than 60 kilometres off South Korea's coast. The South Korean military fired 3 air-to-ground missiles in response. This all just hours after Pyongyang had demanded that joint drills by the US and South Korea end. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un sees the drills as a threat and has vowed consequences, warning that both countries could pay the most horrible price in history. North Korea has repeatedly called its missile launches countermeasures. Japan has been a vocal critic of the latest developments.
North Korea has been repeatedly firing missiles at an unprecedented pace, and it's absolutely impermissible. In regard to further details, we will receive information later.
Washington and Seoul began one of their largest combined military air drills on Monday. Hundreds of warplanes from both sides staged mock attacks for 24 hours a day. North Korea has test-fired a record number of missiles this year. Well, for more on this, we can talk to Dr. Robert Edwin Kelly, American political analyst on inter-Korean affairs at Busan National University, and he joins us live from Busan, South Korea. Doctor, thank you very much indeed for being with us. How should we interpret this exchange of missiles?
Sure. So the North Koreans have been testing a lot this year. I think it fits into that larger pattern of the sort of run-up of tests. I think that in general is because the larger sort of medium-term reason is that negotiations between North Korea and South Korea and the U.S. has basically, those negotiations have basically broken down. Donald Trump has left office. The South Korean president is more hawkish than his predecessor. And so I think that's why you're getting these general series of tests, and that's what today's is a part of. I think what's really noticeable, though, about today's test, I think what's garnered so much attention is the one missile that actually strayed over the border and landed in South Korean territorial waters, hence the tough statement by the South Korean president.
And do we think that was intentional?
Yeah, I don't know. I've just been reading a fair amount about that all day, and I'm sort of up in the air on that. On the one hand, it's actually fairly far off to have been a missed shot, to have been sort of a false positive. On the other hand, if they're going to do that, if they're going to sort of provoke the South Koreans, I think there might have been a much greater effort to do so. For example, so apparently it was in this batch of sort of 10 missiles that were shot. Again, we're waiting for sort of details to come in. But, why did the other 9 go in the appropriate direction? This one went off. I mean, it's a little bit strange. It's hard to know. I mean, the one thing that's important, though, I guess, we're not entirely sure. But the larger point, I think, is that North Korea is rather reckless in respecting the sovereignty of the states around it. This is something akin to North Korea's shot over Japan of a missile test about a month ago. You may recall that. North Korea has engaged in terrorism, things like that, and sort of drug running. I mean, North Korea just doesn't have a good record of respecting the territorial, and physical integrity concerns of the states around it. And this is a nice example of that behavior yet again.
Right, we have some technical difficulties. We'll try and get my colleague from London back on the broadcast as soon as possible. For now, let's move on to other global stories. According to the latest exit polls, former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is on course for victory in the elections. Around 80% of the votes have been counted, and the right-wing bloc is projected to win by a slim majority. The exit polls further suggest that Netanyahu's right-wing bloc will command 61 or 62 of the Knesset's 120 seats. According to the polls, Netanyahu's Likud party stands to be the biggest party with 30 to 31 seats. However, a final result is not expected until later this week.
We still have to wait for final results. But one thing is already clear. Our way, the way of Likud, proved itself. I remind you that after getting 52 seats last election, we are on the brink of a very big win. Should final results match those of exit polls, I will establish a national government that will take care of all of Israel's citizens. Without an exception, all of them.
According to projections, extreme right leader Itamar bin Gvir will be given a key help in helping Netanyahu return to power, with his religious Zionism bloc on track for an estimated 14 seats. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid stopped short of conceding Tuesday's election and said that he will wait until the final results were announced.
אין לנו שום כוונות לעצור, אין לנו שום כוונות להפסיק. כל אזרח ישראלי, דתי או חילוני, שמאלני או ימני, יהודי או ערבי, סטרייט או להט"בי, צריך לדעת הלילה שאנחנו נמשיך להילחם כדי שישראל תהיה מדינה יהודית ודמוקרטית, ליברלית ומתקדמת.
Palestinians have expressed disappointment in the Israeli election as the exit polls showed Netanyahu will be placed to return to power.
As a Palestinian, this does not mean anything to me. We tried Netanyahu's policy before as well as Yair Lapid. Both are competing in conducting crimes against Palestinians. Their election campaigns are always launched at the expense of the Palestinian blood. They do not benefit us. On the contrary, they hurt us. Our Palestinian blood is a measure of their success.
And for more updates, we have a report from our correspondent Jody Cohen. Listen in.
The final result will be known later this week, but it looks like former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be given the opportunity to form the next Israeli government. This would mean a third term in office for him. He's expected to join together with the ultra-Orthodox Shas and United Torah Judaism parties, as well as the ultra-nationalist Religious Zionist Party, whose policies include expelling Israelis who express support for terrorists and the death penalty for terrorists themselves. Netanyahu has promised to form a national government that he says would return pride, strength and security to the country, but has also vowed to heal the rifts in society. This is Jody Cohen for WION World as One.
Meanwhile, Russia is reportedly recruiting former elite Afghan commandos who fought alongside US and Western allies for almost 2 decades to now fight Russia's war in Ukraine. These US-trained Afghan soldiers had escaped to Iran last year when Afghanistan fell to the Taliban. According to the Associated Press, 3 former Afghan generals have admitted that Russia aims to attract thousands of Afghan Special Forces soldiers to join a so-called foreign legion. And for that, Russia is offering lucrative pay, that is around $1,500 a month, and a safe haven so that they and their families can avoid deportation to Afghanistan. The generals say that the soldiers who have been abandoned by US and its allies have no choice. Returning to Afghanistan, they say, would mean certain death. One of the generals that Associated Press spoke with said that Russia is using the mercenary Wagner Group for this recruitment. The Wagner Group is a notorious organization that officially does not exist. It is believed to be run by Yevgeny Prigozhin, an associate of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Yevgeny's spokesperson, though, has dismissed reports of recruiting former Afghan soldiers as crazy nonsense. The American soldiers and intelligence operatives who have run operations in Afghanistan have long warned of such a scenario, saying these Afghan elite groups have been on the Taliban's target and that they would have no other option but to join hands with US enemies, either out of anger against the US or just to stay alive and keep their families safe. A retired CIA officer, in fact, admitted that the US did not get those soldiers out as promised, and now it's coming home to roost. Russia says it is resuming its participation in the Ukraine grain deal. This comes after Russia had pulled out of the deal over an attack on its Crimea naval base. According to Russia, it has received significant guarantees from Kyiv on demilitarizing a maritime corridor. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says the corridor for exporting grain needs a reliable and long-term defense.
Russia has to know it will get a firm answer from the world to any of its steps which are derailing our agricultural exports. This is a question of literally life and death for tens of millions of people.
As Russia continues to strike Ukrainian cities and targets its energy facilities, authorities in the Ukrainian capital are now preparing more than 1,000 heating points across the city. According to authorities, missile and drone attacks have damaged 40% of Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Officials in Ukraine are looking forward to equip the locations with generators and other necessities such as water. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian First Lady Olena Zelenska urged tech workers from around the world to help save the people of Ukraine.
You have the power to determine the direction in which this world moves. After all, the dystopias we read about in science fiction novels and the threats of the destruction, of life destruction, are much closer than you think. We felt it in Ukraine because of Russian terror. Because Russia puts technology at the service of terror.
Let's move on now. The cost of living crisis is affecting customers across the world. Inflation is on the rise, and that means food prices are soaring. Prices of your daily essentials have spiked. While people stress to afford their groceries, companies around the world, it seems, are piling up on profits. Coca-Cola, for example, hiked the prices of its drinks and chips by 17% from last year. Its profits even went up by 20%, the same way its profits went up last year, given the price increase. For years, the price hikes for food products have come up in small steps. The companies, even eateries, worry that big hikes can frighten consumers. But over the last year, as wages rose and the cost of the raw ingredients soared, food companies and restaurants started passing along these expenses to customers. But there is another catch. Amid concerns that world economies could be headed for a recession, some companies are continuing to raise prices even if their own inflation-driven costs have been covered. Critics say that the moves are all about increasing profits, not covering expenses. Although food companies are prominent examples of how rapid inflation is being passed on, from producers to consumers, and the trend is not limited to them. It is evident across a wide variety of industries. Executives from banks, airlines, hotels, consumer goods companies and other firms say they are finding that customers have money to spend and that they can tolerate these high prices. In Ecuador, 5 police officers were killed in explosive attacks. The attacks were in response to prisoner transfers from overcrowded and violent prisons, and this prompted President Guillermo Lasso to declare a state of emergency in 2 provinces.
I'm declaring state of emergency and a curfew at 9 p.m. in the provinces of Guayas and Esmeraldas. The forces of order will intensify their operations to guarantee the security of the citizens of Guayas and Esmeraldas. These sabotage and terrorism acts are, as we can say, a declaration of war against the rule of law, the government, and against all of you, the citizens. We will not allow it. I'm here and I have decided to act firmly within the law.
Earlier, 6 explosions were reported in several areas of the western city of Guayaquil. 2 policemen were killed in an attack on a patrolling car in the suburbs. Later in the day, 3 other officers were killed in the city. 3 explosions were reported and 7 prison officers were taken hostage by inmates in protest of prisoner transfers. According to reports, the officers were released after negotiations. Ecuador's prison system has faced structural problems for decades now. The jail violence has also soared since 2 years. Ecuador is a transit point for drugs destined for America and Europe, and according to Lasso, the overnight attacks are being treated as an open declaration of war by gangs. Lasso has repeatedly used emergency declarations to try and counter violence. After a successful 18-month pilot in New Zealand, consumer goods giant Unilever is expanding its trial of a 4-day working week to Australian employees. The Australian trial will begin on November the 14th, while the New Zealand experiment will also continue. In New Zealand, the pilot saw strong business performance plus happier staff and a third or fewer sicker days. Unilever's trial for a four-day week went on with 80 staff members for 18 months. Workers reported less stress and absenteeism dropped by a third. The company says it could be rolled out across its offices worldwide, while the British firm Unilever owns famous brands including Dove, Ben & Jerry's, Magnum and many other major brands. It is the largest company to back the radical new work system after piloting it for 18 months in its New Zealand offices. Around 80 staff members were paid full salaries during the trial, and bosses noted there was an improvement in worker satisfaction. Now, it was quite a hectic Wednesday morning for the workers and staff at the Sydney Taronga Zoo as 5 lions managed to escape their enclosures at about 6:30 a.m. local time. 4 of the 5 lions made their way back to the enclosure a few hours later, and a cub was tranquilized and returned to the zoo by 9 a.m. local time. The news of the escape prompted the zoo to issue a Code 1 alert at the time of the incident. There were also many guests who were present at the zoo as part of an overnight roar and snore program soon after the alert. All of the guests were rushed to safety.
4 of the lions calmly made their way back into their main exhibit and dens, and 1 lion cub was safely tranquilized. All animals are now safe in their back of house exhibit and are being closely monitored. All zoo staff responded and acted swiftly, and procedures and processes were followed as they should have been. As a result, the situation was under control within minutes.
The zoo enclosure is home to Atto and Maya and their 5 cubs. While Atto and 4 cubs escaped, Maya and one of the cubs, Ayana, stayed in the premises. A formal review has been launched to understand how the lions managed to escape. In sports, Liverpool delivered the response manager Jurgen Klopp was looking for as the 6-time winners beat Italian side Napoli 2-0 to close out their group stage campaign in the Champions League. This is Napoli's first defeat across all competitions this season. The Champions League has been the sole bright spot in a wretched campaign so far for Liverpool, and defeats against relegation threaten Nottingham Forest and Leeds United, leaving the Reds 15 points behind leaders Arsenal in the Premier League. Napoli had gotten hell for leather in the reverse as the Reds' defence concentrated mostly on Victor Osimhen. But after a lengthy VAR delay, the goal was ruled out for offside. Liverpool needed a 4-goal swing to go top of the group. But with time running out, Napoli were all sure of being handed a seeding for the round of 16. The deadlock that turns the season around, but there have been several false dawns already over the last 2 months, and this weekend's trip to Tottenham Hotspur will be the real indicator.
We showed tonight everything. We showed pieces of really good football, and the defensive stuff was on high level. You said it right, Napoli is in the moment a real force, really, and so it could have been extremely difficult for us tonight, but the boys played a really good game, and that's why it was not.
The Lima neighborhood in Peru witnessed 4 superheroes strolling on the streets, but don't be fooled. These 4 Marvel heroes were in fact the members of the special Peruvian police squad, which ended up busting a drug gang. We leave you with these visuals as we wrap up this broadcast. Stay tuned to WION World is One.
We're close to Halloween Day, where people dress up and put on costumes of various characters. So we thought that by using these costumes, we would not attract attention, since there is a school, and if people saw these characters walking down the street, they would think that we were coming to perform a show at the school.
This is right, Arab.